Hey, what's up? Zach here, and today I've got the all-new LeBron 22. Let's get into them. Now, starting off in the uppers, you do have an entire bed of really, really chunky synthetic leather, and then that's basically just, over top of, or, that giant Nike logo is just kind of inset and stitched into that. Now, going under that, you also have a really thick layer of padding on the underneath side of the uppers, what actually contacts your foot. You do get Nike Sphere around the heel counter and the ankle collar, and then in the tongue, it's a double thickness tongue. It is padded to the hilt. Interestingly enough, though, and I think this is, I don't know if it's the Nike Sphere or just Nike materials, but I had to do this on 2 separate days. I just didn't trust it. I just didn't know if my heat gun was off or something. But these only heated up 94.1 degrees on the breathability test. I had that really same thing. One day I had them in here. It was super humid, kind of hot, sticky. Really not a big deal at all. And the other times I had it on, it was pretty mild, but no matter what the temperature or kind of the moisture in the air, I honestly did not have a problem in these, and I was shocked just because of, number one, how heavy they are and just how substantial and just kind of how bear hugging, the uppers feel. You look at it on the breathability mapping, I actually did this for an extended length of time. There is no fog getting out of that forefoot. It is all getting out in and around the tongue. I mean, there is perforations in the outer layer of the uppers and in the tongue, but it doesn't connect to anything underneath of it. The fog just kind of has to find its way out, but it's how those materials handle the heat and moisture that I think is what gives these shoes such an advantage in terms of handling that heat. Moisture, I think if you are a heavy sweater, eventually you're gonna start to overcome that just because there's not a lot of places for it to get out. But in terms of handling heat, honestly, for the profile and just, like I said, how substantial the uppers are. Probably one of the best on the market, like I said, relative though to the bulk of them. Now, speaking of that tongue, you do have an integrated kind of cuff lace system, kind of going distal in the lace line, then kind of going up, it's just reinforced metal eyelet stays, which are just integrated lace eyelets. You do not get a runner's knot. And the gusset on these is actually pretty distal in the shoe. It doesn't come up super high. It's kind of cut in. It feels very comfortable. You do get a decent lockdown. I will say though, the heel slippage is mild, no matter if it's broken in or not. Nothing that I could really tell or notice, but that is just a product of the gusset kind of being, like I said, cut in. Is it bad? No, just like I said, different than a little bit of a higher, more aggressive gusset that comes all the way up into the high ankle. Now, speaking of that ankle, if you look at the heel counter on these things, you do get kind of a reinforcement of the outer layer of the uppers, and that complements that double thick Katie line heel counter, that internal heel counter, which I absolutely love, just imparts so much stability to the rear foot of the shoe. It is such a simple tweak that I do think does an outsized job. Now, you look at these things on the upper durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper. Honestly, it did better than I thought. Yeah, I mean, the burr does start to work through there, but it doesn't get through the outer layer, and it's just synthetic leather. So just goes to show you, number one, how thick the uppers are, but they also are a little bit more tough than you think they're going to be. Obviously, on an outdoor court, you're going to rip through it, but on an indoor court, like I said, I do think the durability, like I said, better than you think it's going to be, but it is still just a synthetic leather upper. But getting into the midsole teardown, this is why I kind of hung on to these shoes a little bit longer to do this review than I normally do, and that's because I wanted to see what this quote-unquote saddle was going to do. As you can see, it is stitched into the uppers as well as the midsole, creates a saddle that goes all the way from the medial side of the shoe, the medial arch, all the way to the lateral arch. It is very, very broad, very, very wide. And you look at it on the microscope, and there's some resin in there. It does appear to be either some foam or maybe some really flexible TPU. I mean, it is more than just synthetic leather. And to me, it does just as much as I would say like a Move Game Day would do, maybe like a Curex orthotic would do, like a very flexible over-the-counter orthotic, right? Like one that's not going to give like a ton of rigid support, but like you can feel something is there, which, I actually think is, pretty good for, for what it is. And like I said, I think the reason it does a decent job is because it is just so broad. Right? So I'm going to count it as a shank in the shank score. The rest of it, you get the really chunky rear foot Zoom Air unit, then the Zoom Turbo unit, and the forefoot that is top loaded. And you do get a top loaded shank on top of that, yippee. And then you do have a full bed of Cushlon 2.0 in there. So honestly, a very responsive, very, number one, cradling midsole. And I know they're calling it a saddle, so I'm probably like toeing the company line, calling it, a cradle feeling. But it does feel like it is giving you some support there. You look at it on the bounce height test, 47 centimeters in the rear foot, 43 in the forefoot. That is pretty typical for those two Zoom units, especially with, Cushlon 2.0 on them. I will say one thing about Cushlon 2.0. Remember, Cushlon 2.0 it is proprietary, but it is basically rubberized EVA. And if you do want to get the same kind of molding capabilities of rubberized EVA, make sure you check out the new Zen Sport and Recovery Slide by Xenon. This is my collaboration sandal with Xenon Paddle. It is an entirety of rubberized EVA. It's a much more dense kind of formulation of rubberized EVA versus, Cushlons or some other rubberized EVAs you see on the market, because it's meant to, number one, actually be ground contact and mold your dorsal arch. What's actually touching your foot is TPEE, that is thermoplastic polyester elastomer foam. That's what you see in a lot of super shoes. And then there's some fun surprises in the midsole, which I'll save for my teardown video that is coming out this week. So if you're watching this video in the future, it's already out. I'll leave it linked in the description below. So you want to check these out, leave a link to the description to the actual slide where you can get them, as well as the review. All right, let's get on to the outsole. All right, I will say on the outsole, this was what I was most skeptical of in the shoe. I think that, and then a close second was the midfoot saddle. Midfoot saddle pleasantly surprised me, and the outsole tread drastically surprised me in very good ways. Now, you look at it, is just linear patterns. It's basically broken up into, triangles, right, that break up these linear treads. So you're basically just getting multi-directional linear tread patterns. You look at it on the grip test ramp, it doesn't slip till 42 degrees. And then, you look at it on the viewing box, and you're getting a little bit of rubber movement there. The flange is super chunky, which honestly, we'll talk about it in the fit section. There is some good and bad to that. But suffice to say, it is a long flange. It is very chunky. So kudos to them for that. The one thing I will say is on foot, no matter what the temperature or moisture level where I was playing or dust level, these things had some of the most sure-footed grip of the year. No question. I mean, these things were, at least to me, in that very, very top echelon of gripping shoes. Yes, they do pick up dust. Super easy just to wipe down, and then you get right back that's like really, really, just confident traction. Almost reminded me of the Fresh Foam BBV2, the traction. And when I saw how this was laid out, I was kind of wondering if it was going to be decent, and it's just, yeah. Number one, I think it's because the flange is so chunky, so you are actually getting some compression there. It's almost like grabbing into the court when you're like pivoting laterally, because you can feel a little bit of give, right, when they start to get a little bit dusty, same as the Fresh Foam BBV2. But unlike the Fresh Foam BBV2, where it's all those little, flanges of rubber that dig into the court, it's actually the lateral flange on these ones, I think, is doing the same thing, if that makes sense. But also pretty nimble shoes for how heavy they are. Like I said, I was just really, really pleasantly surprised from what I found out actually on foot. I mean, I know they did well on the grip test ramp, but on foot, really, really, I found them great. If you look at these things on the speed ratio, they come in at a 2.62, shank score of 0.3. Like I said, I am going to count the midfoot saddle as a shank. Brings that thing up to a 2.92. Yeah, I mean, I think that's maybe a little bit generous for their weight, but I'll get to this in the performance section because it goes all around the shoe. But I do think they give enough back to justify the weight. I'll just say that. And I do think getting up and down the court, if you're someone with a little bit stronger legs and you can put enough energy into them, I do think they give a lot back. And like I said, the midfoot saddle, in terms of kind of, breaking into your foot nicely, you're getting a little bit more, like I said, the cradling feeling of more maximalist shoes, but also with all the zoom in it, the top-loaded shank. Cushlon 2.0 is pretty responsive. It's just all around a pretty responsive shoe. And you look at this on the outsole durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper. I mean, not a millimeter of damage. Durometer comes in at 16.25. The one thing is it is very thin rubber, and the uppers are going to just get torched on outdoor courts if they're dragging at all. So I'd say these are still indoor shoes, but on indoor courts, my hope is as long as manufacturing quality is good with these, that they should last a decent amount of time. All right, but getting into the fit of the LeBron 22, also some pretty surprising numbers. Only an 8-degree inflare, which is pretty mellow. 28.8 centimeters of length, pretty standard. 9.2 centimeters of metatarsal width. 10.1 centimeters of toe box width. And then only a 25-degree taper in the forefoot. So it's a decently mellow shoe. I'd say if you're a narrow medium foot, and go true to size on these. A 2E, I broke them in true to size. The uppers are pretty plush and malleable. You can break them in. I had some cramping on the way to breaking them in, but just with kind of everything around them, the materials that they're made with, they did mold around me pretty well. I'd say a 4E, definitely go up a half size at least. If you've got long toes, long feet, long arch, I'd say if 4E, you could probably go up one size. The problem is, like I said, these are heavy shoes, so To me, try to stay true to size. I would say if you're a very short-footed, narrow foot, you can go down half size, like I said, just to get the weight reduction in them. I think that's kind of the name of the game, is keeping the weight down in these. Now, in terms of the snake bitten foot, I want to address the ankle sprainers first, because I've always said from the 20s to the 21s that, the LeBron line is actually a really decent shoe for ankle sprainers. I don't think the LeBron 22 is any different in terms of its actual construction. But for high volume feet such as myself, because the flange is long and the rubber is kind of soft around there, I mean, I know the durometer is decently high, but it's not super high, you do feel like it's compressing on you. Did I ever feel unstable in them? Did I ever feel like I was going to roll? No. They actually felt really solid underfoot. I would just say, when you get them, make sure you kind of go easy on them at first, see how they're interacting with your feet, and see if you like the sensation, because it is a little bit different. It's not bad. Like I said, I don't think they're unstable, but the sensation you get in them is a little bit different than a traditional shoe that is like a very good, stable ankle spraining shoe. Now, like I said, the inflare is not bad. The toe box taper is not bad. So, they do stay decently, stable on the ground. And for heel pain, ball of foot pain, arch pain, especially in these things, these might be like the shoe of the year for arch pain, especially if you can put an orthotic on top of that saddle. It's going to do really well. Now, that saddle is going to start to break down if you're somebody with really, really hypermobile flat foot and you're a heavier player. So I would throw an orthotic in there just to get more longevity out of that. But it's better than the shoe that doesn't have one, right? So even though, yeah, it will break in over time, you are going to get, I think, a time in these where you kind of hit that nice little window where it's going to be molded and broken into your foot, but also really supportive. So I'd say throw a pair of low-profile orthotics in these things, and yeah, as long as you do that, this is one of the better shoes this year for more lumps, bumps, bruises, and snake bites on your feet. All right, but getting into the performance of LeBron 22s, this is where I'm glad I held off on this, because the first time I played in these, I was on fresh legs, felt good. These felt good. Okay, great. Pretty much same LeBron, from 2021 to 22, all thumbs up. But then I hopped on a plane and did a 5-day tennis trip where I was testing out all bunch of, new tennis shoes that are coming out in the new year. It was for Tennis Warehouse. And so we were playing, I think we played 4 days in a row, minimum 3-4 hours a day. And I am not used to playing tennis that much. And my quads, when I got home, were on fire. And the next day I was like, okay, I got to finish this review. Let me do another round in these. And when I tell you my quads were screaming, it felt like the actual muscle fibers were pulling apart. That's just how, that's not what that week did to me. And these shoes still felt amazing. I could still get up for layups in these. Honestly, looking at the film, I didn't look all that much different on this. I mean, obviously, there's not, I'm not getting that high up on the ground anyway, but just like, my launch, and just my technique, getting up for, little jump shots here and there, moving back and forth, side steps, things like that, step backs and these things still felt great. And with how heavy they are, I really thought that was the biggest testament to these things, that maybe when your legs aren't feeling so great, even though they are a little bit heavy, they're still giving enough back. They're still doing enough. And that midfoot cradle, or what's it called, the saddle in them, honestly, it felt really good. And for being on this court, which my court doesn't give a lot back, it does not flex like a hardwood court does and give you a little more bounce. Like sometimes if you're on a really, really lively hardwood court, some shoes will feel a little bit better than they really are because the court underneath you giving it to you. This is not giving you anything, and I still felt really great in these. I still had sure-footed grip in them, and so I think that's really what made me kind of that aha moment with these. That like, okay, these are one of the better shoes of the year, and it just shows you that when Nike wants to make a shoe, they can make a shoe. These ones in the Sabrinas this year, I mean, really kind of cut through the entire market. And like I said, I'm really glad I held off to use these when I was feeling, when my legs were just feeling like jello, because I really think it gave the true sense of these, that, yeah, they're heavy, but the weight is going into good places, right? Like their heart's in the right place with all the weight. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, especially if you're someone that gets the LeBrons for ankle spraining, and if you have these and kind of what your feelings have been in these. I'm fascinated to hear if people were feeling the same sensations in these as I was versus the 20s and the 21s. So let me hear your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you want to see what I'm talking about with the Nike Sabrina 2, which I think is, like I said, another Nike shoe this year that has kind of really cut through the crowd, make sure you click into this video up above, and make sure you check out the Zen Sport and Recovery slides in the description below. Respect, rubber, and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.